Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to episode 27 of the Digital Law News series. So I'm joined today with my colleague Peter, and we're just going to be discussing some of the latest news stories relating to digital and technology. So just for those who don't know, Digital Law is a specialist law firm, and we specialise in all things to do with data protection, digital law, and technology matters as well. So I'll just pass over to Peter just to introduce himself before we kick off.
Thanks, Laura. Hello, everyone. Yep. So I'm the managing director and a solicitor at Digital Law, and indeed we do everything around digital and e-commerce. And it's been a particularly busy start to the year, helping a lot of our clients in the UK and overseas as well, as they deal with everything from Brexit to data transfers, data adequacy, and getting their businesses in order. And looking forward to sharing some of our insights with you again this week.
Thanks, Peter. Just a reminder as well, this podcast is brought to you by Digital Law and is produced by Anson Evaluate as well. So let's kick off with the first story. So the first one we're going to be talking about today is the scam that's going around regarding the NHS COVID vaccinations. And this is a scam that is produced by sophisticated scammers, and they're essentially exploiting Britain's mass vaccination programme by sending out bogus emails and text messages purporting to be the NHS offering a COVID jab. So many of these are being sent to people on the basis that they have their family genetics and medical history makes them vulnerable to COVID-19 and becoming seriously ill with it. So this is sent in an email, and I've just got that on the next slide just to show you all what it looks like. And basically the receiver of this is given two options: to accept the invitation and to decline the invitation. And if you do accept, you are asked then to enter your bank details in order to charge or rebate any charges linked to the vaccination programme. So we all know by listening to the news, all the NHS vaccination scheme is free of charge, obviously, because it's offered by the NHS. So what basically we just wanted to mention here is, if you do see a message like this, just don't listen to it, because if the people will be getting in touch with you via phone or by letter, and you will never be asked to pay to receive the vaccine.
Indeed, thanks, Laura. And indeed, the key here is to bear in mind that it's coming from the NHS, which its unifying and founding principle is free at the point of use. So you will never have to provide your bank details in order to be able to use the NHS if you are a UK resident. And this scam is just trying to prey on people's, I think, understandable wariness when it comes to coronavirus. And sometimes, let's face it, if you're not sitting there watching the government's briefing every evening for an hour, and you're not reading through the newspapers and wading through the doom watch that is national news, you might not be aware of the good point that Laura just said about how you are supposed to be contacted when it comes to receiving your vaccination. So this is really preying on the unwary, and in particular when it's coronavirus, and many of us have heard terrible stories about what happens to people who get this terrible disease. So it's just preying on insecurity to make people click and then provide bank details, thinking, well, at least if I provide this, I'll get the vaccination. And Laura, of course, it's a development as well of that. You know, we saw scams going around last year where it would purportedly come from NHS Test and Trace, saying, you've been in contact with someone who's tested positive for COVID, please click here and pay for your coronavirus test. So this is unfortunately a development of a well-trodden path that the fraudsters have been taking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a good reminder that these fraudsters and these people who create these scams are very intelligent in the way they do it. They look and see that people are wanting the vaccine and they want it as quickly as possible so they can get back to some type of normality, and they're kind of preying on people's vulnerabilities in that sense.
Exactly, and also it's as that slide that you've put up their shows. It does have the NHS branding on there. It refers to the nhs.gov.uk website. At first glance, it does look like a genuine communication from the NHS.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of remembering that, unfortunately, just because it has some branding on it that looks genuine, does not mean that it is genuine. In the same way that I think many people have trained themselves not to click on the communication that purports to come from their bank. In the same way, you have to think with healthcare, I'm not necessarily going to trust this, and instead I might call my GP and confirm using my trusted GP number. So even if it's someone purporting to be from your doctor's surgery, I wouldn't then click on a message like that or click on a number in there. It's a matter of open the phone book and use the communication details that are normal and valid to get through to your normal, reliable care provider. It's a shame that we have to do this. It's a shame that there are people out there that wish to prey on people's vulnerabilities and anxieties over coronavirus. But sadly, it is a regrettable fact of life now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main message here then is just to always double check and things like this. It's just comes back to the basics of phishing, is just to never trust an email unless you know it's 100% genuine.
Exactly.
So moving on to the next story then, kind of staying with the same thing in regards to fraud. So this is a story that was on the BBC, and this is regarding fraud reaching epidemic levels in the UK, and is now being seen as a national security issue. And this is from a report by the Royal United Services Institute. So over the last year, so from 2019 to 2020, 3.7 million incidents were reported of members of the public being targeted by credit card, identity and cyber fraud. And this was from the crime survey by the England and Wales. And £190 billion a year is basically lost in the UK by credit card, identity and cyber fraud, which is making it the most prevalent crime in the UK. So just for some more statistics, private sector takes the biggest loss each year, and in 2017 alone, it was estimated that the cost of fraud to businesses alone in the UK was at £140 billion. And then the public sector also takes a big loss as well. So this includes benefit fraud, tax credit and student loan fraud as well. And they take a hit between £30 million and 30 billion and 50 billion. So yeah, I think this story is just to highlight how big of an issue fraud is becoming in the UK, especially, and it's been more increasingly to do with credit card, identity and cyber fraud, a lot of the things that we talk about.
Indeed. Thanks, Laura. I mean, you and I have done quite a bit of work on this over the years. Regular listeners might like to scroll back through some of the posts that we've put on our website, because Laura put in a few very detailed blogs, and I think it was 2019 when a Times investigative journalist went into the action fraud offices and found it was full of people on short-term contracts and outsourced contracts who were basically just listening to people who reported fraud matters, barely even bothering to enter the information onto the system. And it just showed that nothing was really done. And it highlights the fact that when it comes to fraud like this, there isn't much that is done. The crime is recorded. No real effort is made to track down the fraudsters. No real sanction is faced by those who are perpetuating these crimes. And the figure there of 190 billion just shows how lucrative it is. I mean, why would you risk, potentially being caught by the police and spending a lifetime in prison by robbing a bank to get your couple of million, when you could just do it very easily through a couple of clicks and a couple of transactions, and bang, you could have your little nest egg there through having done very little, and the chance of the police catching up with you is incredibly remote. And that is the sad fact of where we are. I think the use of the word epidemic at this time, when we're used to we now know what the words epidemic and pandemic means from painful reality. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Royal United Service Institute has used that language, because I think we've gone up one horrific curve with COVID in terms of increasing cases and fatalities, and now we're gradually on a curve back down on the other side. And this is showing that we are still on a very much an upward curve when it comes to cases of fraud, and it is increasing when we go from 140 billion in 2017 to 190 billion last year. And what is going to be the equivalent of lockdown or a vaccination that stops this exponential growth of fraud, in particular online fraud? What's going to actually stop it? The government has a huge amount on its plate, from COVID to Brexit to building back better after all of this. And arguably one big part of it is going to be to plug the hole in the economy. I mean, if the economy is losing 190 billion from fraud, I mean, that is larger than a number of the sectors that make up the UK economy, 190 billion. We just had a Brexit deal that was almost prejudiced through issues around the fishing industry, which is tiny. It's only a couple of 100 million compared to 190 billion. So the cost to individuals, the cost to businesses is rapidly becoming unsustainable. If you're hit by a loss here, an insurer isn't necessarily going to pick up the tab. The insurance industry can't withstand, claims of that size, 190 billion. It's got to come from somewhere. So it's a bit like, that we can see here that the light is flashing red.
Yeah.
You need to do something globally about fraud. The question is what?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Royal United Services Institute, who actually put this report together that is referred to in the article, they are pushing for the UK to start taking fraud and cybercrime and credit card theft and identity theft a lot more seriously. So it becomes one of the government's priorities in terms of getting the country back to how it should be. But yeah, we'll see if that happens.
Indeed, I think it's good that this has come from the RUSI, because they're one of the sort of think tanks that really has produced some real good research, and when it says comments like this, it does tend to be listened to by government. So hopefully this will end up being picked up, and resources will be put into plugging these gaps and perhaps supporting those who are then victims of fraud. This figure of 190 billion is going to go up before it comes down. Let's not forget that hundreds of millions have been paid out in supposed loans in the course of the last year through the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme and the bounce back loan schemes. And a lot of those went to businesses that needed support. But as the story says there, student loan fraud, benefit and tax credit fraud is common, and there will be fraud whereby people purported to be running strongly trading organizations in order to get hold of these loans, to which only cursory checks were carried out. And the big question is, how much, if any, of these loans will the government ever be able to collect on? So if we lump those unpaid loans into that figure of 190 billion, that could quite easily double or treble on the back of coronavirus in 2020 to 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of money to lose from the economy, that's for sure.
It is.
So moving on then, so this one is regarding a warning that's come from the SRA. So this is regarding to some emails. So somebody has been sending some emails around misusing the name of Kaysen Turner Legal Services. So the emails have been sent from the solicitor's firm, which is actually a genuine firm that is regulated by the SRA. And it must be noted as well that the person they are impersonating in these emails is a genuine solicitor who is also regulated by the SRA and does work for the law firm that they are impersonating. But they're basically sending some emails around from the email address, and they are providing to undertake to the recipient for £5,000 on behalf of the firm. So basically, this is just a warning from the SRA, basically saying that there is no connection between these emails and the actual Alexandra Westwood, who the emails are supposedly from, and just to basically highlight the issue that somebody is clearly being impersonated here.
Indeed, thanks, Laura. I think this is an interesting contrast if we actually compare this to the previous story about the NHS scam, the COVID vaccination scam, because that, of course, is a generic email, the NHS COVID scam, that's just sent out to loads of different recipients. And I think if we send this out to 10,000 people and only 1% of people click on it, that's still a lot of people. What we're looking at here is a very targeted, what they call spear phishing attempt to impersonate a regulated individual working in a regulated entity. In this instance, trying to hope that they'd then be able to tap the recipient up to £5,000. And someone's gone to a fair amount of trouble over this. And I say that from the point of view of, rather than that generic COVID NHS email, which is being sent out to thousands and is all very, very genetic, this is clearly tailored. So you'd be sending specific individual emails to individuals who may have had contact with this firm in the past. And it could well be that this firm has been hacked. That's only my opinion. I'm not saying they have been. I'm just saying it could be that somehow they've got hold of information relating to who would expect to receive an email from this firm, and then receiving if someone does receive an email purporting to come from that firm, they might look and think, oh, well, I've received this before, and they wouldn't stop and check to see if it was indeed genuine, and might then be duped into potentially handing over the cash. So this isn't something that will be sent out to tens of thousands of people. This will be sent out to a few very specific targeted individuals purporting to come from this solicitor. And regrettably, the technology to allow this to be done is very easily available on the dark web. So if, for example, this fraudster had got a genuine email from Alexandra Westwood, the software that allows them to, for example, cut and paste their email signature into the body of a new email, including decals and branding and footers and font, all that can be very easily put on so it looks as though it is a genuine email. So the recipient might have to really struggle to check here to work out that actual that domain looks perfectly genuine. You'd really struggle to spot the difference here between potentially this fraudulent email and a genuine one. So a comparatively large amount of trouble has been taken, but I must emphasize that we're only talking about more trouble compared to if it was a bulk one going out to thousands. So it only takes 5-10 minutes for a fraudster to create a false domain like this, to cut and paste across new email signature details and put together what would seem like a really convincing targeted email. And just send out a few of those, and even then, if only one person clicks on it, congratulations, you've then got yourself £5,000. This is a warning about one specific one, but Laura, I don't think it's difficult to imagine that potentially dozens or hundreds of emails like this could be sent every day for all we know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we wanted to include this story to highlight that, like the SRA are highlighting this one email that seems to have been an issue. Maybe they've had a lot of complaints about it. A lot of people may have received it, and it's maybe a high number of people have actually fallen for it and then have lost money from it. So clearly it's grabbed the SRA's attention, but there's bound to be ones like this every single day that just don't get picked up or just get ignored. So I think it is just important to report them when you do see them. Always double check if it's a communication with a previous firm that you've worked with that's just come out of the blue and you've not spoke to them in a while. Always double check and always revert back to the email address that you do have for them if you are unsure, just before you do anything. So moving on to our next story for today then. So this is in regards to Grindr and a fine they have received from the Norwegian Data Protection Authority. So the app Grindr, the social media dating app, has actually received an £8.6 million fine from the Norwegian Data Protection Authority. So this is a fine of 10% of their global annual revenue. So obviously they've exercised their rights under GDPR, because we know that they can fine people up to 10% of their annual revenue. So the dating app actually shared deeply personal, sensitive information with advertisers, and this included things like their location, sexual orientation, and mental health details as well. So the NCC, which is Norway's Consumer Council, actually launched a study into the data practice of 10 different apps, and Grindr was one of them, along with other period trackers and dating services as well. And Grindr actually stood out from the bunch in terms of the lack of information contained in its privacy policy regarding the information it shares with the advertisers. So I think it's just important to raise here that there is a lot of very sensitive information on apps like these, especially when a lot of people are using them now. We can't go out and meet new people, so people are relying on apps like Grindr, Tinder, even social media like Facebook, Instagram, and things like that, just to meet new people and make new social connections. So the amount of data that is on those apps at the moment, people then sharing this data with companies that isn't really essential, is a really great risk to data subjects.
It is, Laura, absolutely right. And the thing here is the sheer richness of the data. You know, we aren't just talking about profile information. Clearly, the Grindr app on a mobile device is going to be taking quite accurate GPS data, because the way it works out, as it does with Tinder, is to work out people in your locality. And therefore, so it's taking all that GPS data, and that allows a fairly rich picture of someone to be developed, because then, if you know, it will work out from GPS data where you go to work, where you live, where you go to socialize. Yeah. So that's a lot of information potentially in of itself, before you then go into other quite sensitive personal information that would be on the profile. I think it's interesting that it's Norway's Consumer Council that's done this. They are real innovators when it comes to carrying out their investigations. One of their directors, Finn Mørstad, I've heard him speak at several conferences, and he's the guy who, if you want to have a laugh, just go on YouTube and search for My Friend Kayla, Cayla. And Finn did a TED talk a few years ago about this rather horrific doll that you can give to your child. And the idea is that you can pair it with your mobile phone via Bluetooth, and then you can talk to the child through the mobile phone. Scary thing is, though, there was no encryption over that pairing, and there was none of this enter a code to make sure that you had paired it. It was all done quite easily through the handset. Now, Bluetooth, of course, can be affected to a range of 40 feet, and that meant that someone could be outside the property, use their Bluetooth, connect to the doll, and talk to the child. That's the reason why the Kayla doll is no longer available for sale in the European Union. And is now, I mean, the only one that's left is in the East Berlin Spying Museum, because it's that leakier device. But you know, that was one investigation that Finn worked on, and he's also quoted in this article. So they've looked at Grindr at the same time as looking at a lot of other apps by the look of it, and it's Grindr that's been the one that, on the evidence in there, in terms of the lack of clarity in its privacy policy, that they've said, look, you aren't confirming that all of this information is being provided to our advertisers. Clearly, that's where they make their revenue. Yeah, nothing in life is for free, unfortunately, and that's how we get all of these free apps, is because your information is then mined and used for advertising and marketing purposes, sadly. It's just in this, it's the sheer breadth of the very personal information that is being farmed, and then the fact that it's just then not even clear and transparent in their own privacy policy. It could well be that they never bothered to update the privacy policy with the advent of GDPR, and if that is the case, then they've certainly been found wanting, or perhaps their GDPR compliance is only very cursory. And they simply haven't complied with the needs to be properly transparent and demonstrate proper compliance with the law as it now stands.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is just a good reminder that you need to make sure your website privacy policies, app privacy policies are always up to date. And it's not the law to update them every 12 months, but it is good to look at them and make sure they are up to date, and make sure you're reviewing them and updating them every 12 months, if not sooner. And especially when your business practices change as well.
Yeah, and of course you'd know that very well, Laura. I mean, I know that you've even spent this week been working on quite a few privacy policies, so you're
Yeah.
experienced with exactly what needs to go into these things, and you simply can't escape with leaving them fallow or not updating them to reflect best practice. But it's getting to the point now that we can spot very easily. I was looking at one potential client's website today and a quick look at their privacy policy, and you knew within seconds that it simply wasn't up to muster. This shows what can happen. Why do you have to update your privacy policy? You know, if it's not good and up to date, you can face a substantial fine. Here it is in black and white.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to the next one then, this is in regard to hackers and the flogging of Brits, Deliveroo, Tesco and McDonald's accounts on the dark web for as little as 42p. So there's many people currently selling the accounts of Deliveroo, Tesco and McDonald's on the dark web in order to steal the points that they have on the card, on the account, or order free food. So free to the person who's buying it, obviously. So I think the important bit here is just the danger of the knock-on effect from this. Not only will the accounts be stolen and then sold on the dark web, they then may contain your bank details. They may be able to steal money from you in terms of buying food, or even get your bank details off there themselves, or steal the points that you've built up over, in some cases, a number of years. But also there's a large amount of data on there as well, in terms of how you shop, where you shop, when you usually do your shopping, your eating habits, which could reveal things to do with your religion. So lots of sensitive information on there as well that is being stolen and sold on to these third parties on the dark web.
Absolutely right. And of course, we're all far more reliant on these apps in the course of the last 12 months because all the restaurants have been shut. So hence still it's been bonanza for Deliveroo and McDonald's and everything. And really disappointing to therefore hear that this information is clearly being hacked and is available for sale. Let's face it, we haven't heard about widespread breaches of data being reported by these three organisations. The first thing we're hearing about it is the information being available on the dark web, which is a significant cause for concern, particularly when it's Tesco, particularly when, as you quite rightly say, Laura, the richness of their data allows for a very clear picture to be constructed of all of those consumers, down to disability, down to religion. There's an awful lot you can discern from someone just based on the things that they buy as part of their weekly shop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just the thing. Like, it's clear that a lot of the companies who are having these sort of issues are not prioritising the security enough, as much as they should be. And clearly, if they are having, clearly there's been a breach somewhere. So because it's not been in the media, so maybe they've not reported these breaches. Who knows?
Indeed, let's face it. We scrutinise the information that's out there every week to produce these recordings, and
yeah,
we haven't heard of those three. So the fact that it's being freely available means that someone somewhere has had a significant loss of data. And let's not forget that you would expect them under GDPR to have had to report such a breach. Given the impact on the data subjects, you would expect that to have been reported to the ICO. But if that has happened and the investigation is ongoing, they certainly haven't felt the need to make that public.
Yeah, definitely. So this is our last story today then. So this is a story that's kind of our final story that's a bit of on a lighter note. So we did discuss this last week, and this is regarding the WhatsApp change of terms and how they're going to be now sharing data with Facebook. So this is a story from the UK regulator, and basically the UK regulators have said they're going to write to WhatsApp over Facebook sharing data, over the sharing between WhatsApp and Facebook and the data that is going to be shared. So the Information Commissioner, Elizabeth Denham, actually told a parliamentary committee that in 2017, WhatsApp had committed to not hand any user information over to Facebook until it could prove that doing so was respected by GDPR. So this, until now, until the UK actually left the EU in January after the transition period ended, that agreement was being enforced by the Irish Data Protection Authority. But now this is kind of put back into the UK's hands now, and it's the UK to try and enforce WhatsApp and Facebook to keep into this agreement.
Indeed, thanks, Laura. This is sort of building on what we discussed last week. So the fact here that these commitments have been made by WhatsApp to say, oh, you know, even though our parent company is Facebook, we will not be providing data until we can do it in a manner that respects GDPR. That's the key phrase. They're saying, well, up until such a time we wouldn't share data. So therefore, the onus is therefore on Facebook and WhatsApp to say, we can share this user data in a way that is consistent with GDPR and demonstrates compliance with GDPR. And that's where they would therefore be under an obligation to show that under their new privacy policy, which is being introduced, that they are doing this in a manner that is consistent with GDPR, both with GDPR at an EU level and also with the sort of UK's version of GDPR as enacted through the UK Data Protection Act 2018. So, you know, now that post-Brexit, the UK is the UK ICO is responsible for the relationship with Facebook, given that it holds the data of UK data subjects, then yes, this now falls to Elizabeth Denham. Now, the UK ICO has fined Facebook in the past. They actually fined them £500,000, which was the most you could fine under the old Data Protection Act 1998. So before GDPR came in, Facebook had that largest fine that could be given to it because of the way it hadn't respected data subject rights. And now, of course, under GDPR, that is going to be a tool that is in the ICO's armory when it comes to enforcement. So this assurance has been given, this commitment has been made. Now the ICO will apply the slide rule to the commitments of WhatsApp and Facebook and to the measures that they're now looking to make. And if they are not satisfied it is being done in a manner that respects GDPR, then sanctions and enforcement could follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Facebook and WhatsApp need to show now that they're going to either change this, because I know in the last week we did mention how WhatsApp said that the UK users had to agree to the new terms, but nothing would actually change for UK users. So clearly the ICO do have a belief that this is going to change. So it just sees whether they will actually investigate this and then apply sanctions in the future.
Yeah, but in the meantime, the big takeaway that we made last week, I think, is something we remind people again of now. Do not use WhatsApp for business-related purposes. If you've got personal information on there that you would not wish to see used for marketing purposes or shared with Facebook or used for any other purpose, do not use WhatsApp. So, you know, if you're a volunteer working on the COVID vaccine scheme, do not go and have a WhatsApp group with other volunteers and discuss things on there. It is far too, as a platform, clearly the data can be used for different purposes. So you should be using it if you're involved in a very regulated field like medicine or law or accounting or financial services. Use it by all means to stay in touch with family and friends. But again, I would not use it to share financial information. I wouldn't share bank account sort codes and account numbers. And I wouldn't sort of be discussing next year's holiday plans on there either. It's very much just, I'd say, for cursory information, and anything more personal than that, I'd find a more secure platform. And another reminder, Telegram is certainly not any more secure either.
Thank you, Peter. So that's everything we've got time for today. So just a reminder then, for our usual listeners and for the new listeners that we might have as well. So we do have a special offer on still on our GDPR compliance manual for legal practices. So this was originally on sale 2 years ago now, almost 3, and this was on sale for £195 and is now down around 50% off, and is on sale for £99. So I'll just pass over to Peter just to give you a little bit more information about this.
Thank you very much, Laura. So this is Anson Evaluate's GDPR compliance manual that contains the physical forms and templates and checklists to help you get a handle on your GDPR compliance, to be able to demonstrate that. So it contains, template policies, the checklists that you can then follow. It contains training materials. So, there's a whole section in there on social media, and it will tell you, ways that you should and should not use social media. It tells you about issues over Wi-Fi and communications. It also looks at real world issues. So it's not just everything related to handling data online, but handling data in an office. And it allows you to be able to demonstrate compliance with what the law is looking for. So it is as valid now as it was in 2018. It continues to reflect the law of the land post-Brexit. And it doesn't just apply to law firms. We've had clients of ours who are everything from accountants to those in other highly regulated sectors who've said, we actually find a lot of the principles in here are just as relevant to us as it is to law firms. So if that sounds interesting, do drop us a line and we'll be happy to supply a discounted copy of that to you.
Great, thank you, Peter. So just a reminder for everyone as well, this recording is available as a webinar to view on our website, on our YouTube channel as well, and it is available as a podcast on the usual podcast sites as well. So we will be back next week for another episode. But for now, thank you very much to Anson Evaluate for helping us produce this webinar, and we will see you next week.